कैसी गंदी गंदी कहानियां लिखती हो।
आपका नाम?
जी, इसमत चुगता है।
क्या लिहाफ नाम की कहानी आपने लिखी है?
जी।
जितने भी सेंसर कमेटी के मेंबर थे वो सब खड़े हो गए एंड दे सेड हु रोट द स्क्रीनप्ले। मंटो और इस्मत चुगताई दोबारा पैदा नहीं हो सकते।
An icon of feminism, Ismat Chughtai. I know you all love her. She's written so many books, so many stories about the inner lives of women, conflict, and also the biggest issue I think that she started was female sexuality. These subjects continue to be hushed even today. Her work, even today, is as relevant as it was in the 40s. Her writing interrogates the treatment of women in a patriarchal society. It's impactful, yet subtle. It leaves so much to the reader's imagination. Today, we're going to be speaking with Rahat Kazmi, who's the writer, director, and producer of Lihaaf, which is being streamed on Voot as part of the Voot Select Film Fest. Welcome, Rahat.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
So what drew you to her? Because see, as women, we are drawn to her because maybe she's that icon of feminism. And when we look at her story, she's opened so many avenues. But what drew you to her? And especially towards this one story specifically, what stood out the most?
Lihaaf is such a story जो आप पढ़ के भूल नहीं सकते. It stays with you. The way she has portrayed the story, especially, it is very visual appealing. So apart from being a piece of literature, it was very, very much appealing to me as a filmmaker to portray something like this through shadows on the wall. I discussed this with Sonal Sehgal, who played. The moment I told her, she just jumped. She said, "Oh my God, you want to make Lihaaf." So that's how we started writing. Then we wrote this script. But when we finished writing, we went to meet somebody for casting. And he told us, "Do you have the rights of this story?" That's when we got to know that, oh, we need to take rights from their family. But then we went on to Ismat Chughtai's family. Initially, they were not agreeing because this is one of the best stories. But luckily, because we have made Manto-san before, so they gave us the rights. And that's how the whole journey began. And yeah, my motivation for doing a film which is totally women-centric was a challenge again. This story had, intrigued me a lot. But then I met one of the female producers of this country, I would say. We were discussing some ideas. I told her about this story and I said, I have this script written and I have the rights. And she said, we should make this together, but let a woman director direct it. And that was a bigger challenge for me. I said, why a woman director? Why can't I? And then,
but you portrayed it beautifully, and especially through the eyes of a woman. I would have also said that because sometimes we get so conditioned that only a woman can understand a woman.
Exactly. So that happened, and that gave me a challenge, because as a filmmaker, if you don't get a challenge in making a film, then फिर वो एक regular सा काम हो जाता है. And yes, this story is very relevant, at the same time very complex. You have to understand a woman's psyche, and this helped me as a human being, as a male, also to understand a woman's point of view. This made me more feminist than before. So, and especially Tanishta Chatterjee and Sonal. So I kind of grasped from their point of view also as a woman, how they feel, what they go through. And the best part about this story excites me is that this is not just about a homosexual relationship film. This is more about alternate sexuality. This is more about emotions. There's more layers to it. So there was so much, to be intrigued to do a film like this.
No, and you did it really well. But I must ask, because you looked into probably a lot of her stories, and we're always looking for what next. Were there others that you thought, yeah, these could also become fantastic big screen or on the screen or movies?
Absolutely. There are many stories of her, but somehow this intrigued me a lot, because it's such a bold subject, such a bold story from a teenager's point of view, where we don't even discuss in front of kids or teenagers such issues. But she has, she was so brave to write a story from the point of view of a teenage girl, how she encounters the whole incident. So I was totally sold for this story.
So the story, and like what you talk, is the story also of shame, sharam, haya, ghutan, which is considered the jewelry of a woman, a beautiful, young, well-read woman who's caged in a jail. She's married to someone who really doesn't even care about her. But what was interesting is she craves romance, and romance is what I felt was actually central to Ismat and to the story and the concept of romantic novels, this whole genre, and the way that they thought about them as being a corrupting influence, or what we would call dirty books. Talk about that, because it's very, very intriguing, even as she's reading the story and saying, my God, this is a dirty book.
The society we live in somehow makes us hypocrites. Somebody has said that everybody is a hypocrite in a different manner. So society, teaches us right from the childhood that reading, writing, seeing, watching about sexuality is dirty, whereas it is not. So it is a satire which we have used in the film, that they say ki ishqiya novel, or jazbati kahaniyan, something like that. So those books were considered, and still I think in the traditional society, in the traditional houses, it is still considered as a taboo, as a obscene stories. And even today's time, it is very relevant that every other film or a web series is dragged to the courtrooms for obscenity, or something which is which is not.
So you're still fighting that. What she fought in the 1940s is still happening today.
Absolutely. But my point is that there were always same kind of problems in the society, but there are not writers like Manto and Ismat Chughtai. There are no more brave writers like them, who were so brave at that time, that they had that courage to write such stories boldly and to face the consequences. Like that was the motivation that we, apart from showing the story Lihaaf, there's a track of Ismat Chughtai's life, fighting a case and not apologizing. That was a big step by a woman, and especially a Muslim woman from a society where she's trolled by everyone, from her family to outsiders.
No, so that's why it's beautifully blended, because you show Ismat as a very young woman with a young baby. And, she's at that pinnacle where, life is just kind of very rosy. Yet she takes that step of saying, no, I will go to trial. I will not stand down. Even when she's warned that her izzat, badnami, the words that are used. But she was a free-spirited person. We know a lot about her writings, but how did you delve into understanding her as a person?
By reading about her, and when we met her grandson Ashish, and he told us so many stories about her and Manto. There was a scene which we had to edit later on. That was my favorite scene, where Ismat and Manto had eaten pork in somewhere in Lahore.
Oh, wow. You would have really caused a lot of controversy.
और उस चीज का जब उनको पता चला, because they were confused between hamburger and sandwiches, so they ate pork, and when they discussed it with a friend, he said, "Oh, तुम लोगों ने तो सुअर खा लिया है." So they laughed at it. They were so they were so progressive, and they were so liberal that ऐसा नहीं कि उनको उसके बड़ा गिल्ट हो गया. They laughed at it. मतलब इस तरह के लोगों को अंडरस्टैंड कर पाना. मंटो और इसमें चुगताई, हमने मतलब we read few books about her life, and especially about this court trial. So whatever we have used in the film are the extracts from a book or something. तो मुझे बहुत ताज्जुब हुआ था इस बात पे कि इतने कैजुअल कैसे हो सकते हैं. मंटो इतना कैजुअल कैसे हो सकता है, जिसकी राइटिंग्स इतनी डार्क हैं और इतना सोसाइटी की गहरी बातें करने वाला शख्स. बट ही वाज एक्चुअली वेरी कैजुअल. वो लोग मतलब वो तो हम लोगों ने कई सारे मोन्टाजेस शूट किए थे, जो बाद में लेंथ की वजह से कई जगह काटना पड़ा.
Yeah, he was very casual about it. He's like, I'm writer हो गए हो, so this is part of life,
Yeah. So they were very casual, and मतलब वो लास्ट का भी जो सीन है, जब वो एक आदमी आके इसमें चुगताई को कहता है कि आप माफी मांग लें, आपका सारा खर्चा हम उठा लेंगे. And she asks मंटो कि इनके पैसों से फिर और लाहौर घूमेंगे, तो कहता है बकवास मत करो. And she says कि देखो भाई साहब ये जो मंटो है ना, मैं कोर्ट का तो वो पनिशमेंट बर्दाश्त कर लूंगी, बट मंटो बड़ा खतरनाक आदमी है, ये मेरा जीना आराम कर देगा, तो लेट मी फाइट.
नहीं, but जैसे आपकी मूवी भी शुरू होती है, it begins with Ismat Chughtai going to court and the obscenity trial that happened. And also the fact that the words, I loved it when you put them, and maybe you were being tongue in cheek, when she's being questioned about this word and what is it about that word that is obscene. But what was impressive that the judge, I mean, honestly, was very forward thinking. And the concept, and I want to bring this out because it's very relevant, the concept of freedom of expression, the freedom of the mind, because you bring out these things. I think it's just not the freedom that we just have, that is the physical freedom. And I'd like you to talk about that, because we don't think much about and honoring the people that actually brought us the freedom of the mind.
The judge's character is also very important, because at the end he realizes that there is no obscenity in the story. But there again there's a punch in the dialogue where he says कि तुम्हारी कहानी में तो मुझे कहीं कुछ लगा नहीं, but मंटो बहुत गंदा लिखता है. And she says कि वो समाज को ही आईना दिखा रहा है.
But Ismat and Manto's, their friendship also, even it comes out, was very, very strong, which was also probably, I don't know, a man and a woman, that's also very progressive, having such a close friendship. Not only that, and they were writers too. But he seemed to be her biggest supporter also.
Absolutely. And Manto was somewhere, I feel he was a bigger writer at that time. Like he had more cases on him in that sense also. So yeah, she always looked up to him as a writer also. And she would ask him, she would read his stories when she would write in front of him and take his suggestions. Even in Lihaaf, मंटो के कहने पे उन्होंने आखिर की एक लाइन काटी थी अपनी कहानी में, क्योंकि लास्ट की लाइन में उन्होंने ये लिखा था कि जब मैंने वो बल्ब ऑन किया और उसके बाद जब पर्दा हटा तो मैंने क्या देखा, मुझे कोई पता नहीं कितने पैसे भी दे तो मैं ना बताऊं, ऐसा कुछ लिखा था. तो मंटो ने कहा कि ये चाइल्डिश हो जाएगा, रिमूव दिस लाइन. सो फिर उसने वो या अल्लाह वाला वर्ड लिखा था. द लास्ट वर्ड इज दैट व्हाट आई सॉ या अल्लाह.
And that what you show in your film, that he says na tum bahut galtiyan karti ho.
बहुत गलतियां करते हो. And spelling mistakes वाला scene, that is also a real scene. Everything is like real. We have taken from the books. So that वो जो उनका जो उस जमाने में ये कंप्यूटर तो थे नहीं, तो कातिब होते थे जो उसको ना वो लिखते थे, मतलब जब वो लिख के देते थे तो वो उसको खिताबत करते थे, मतलब उसको लिखते थे. तो that कातिब says कि आपकी spelling mistakes बहुत होती हैं. And she says that I get engrossed into my thoughts and मुझे spellings का ध्यान नहीं रहता, which is very relevant again.
No, but I also like that, because one of the things, I mean, especially because the girl's name is Ismat, so you of course think that, is she narrating her own story? Is she a character in her own story, watching and writing? And even she says, I'm like a cheap camera, taking a snap, and my hands write what I see. So are these also coming from her experience? Is that what you found when she's writing?
Absolutely. This comes from her book. She says that मेरा दिमाग एक सस्ता सा कैमरा है, जो कुछ देखता है बस बटन दब जाता है. और जो बच्ची का नाम इस्मत, हाँ, क्योंकि उसकी अपनी कहानी में भी यही है कि मैंने तो she addresses herself. She says कि I have experienced this. मैंने जब उस वक्त ये देखा, तो that's where, like, from where this came.
I want to ask you, because Manto, Ismat, like you said, they walk hand in hand. They broke so many barriers for writers, and they broke so many. Can you tell us about that? Because it's so relevant today for our audience to understand that.
So yeah, actually they broke so many barriers for writers that you can see in their stories. Whatever they felt, they were not biased at all. And the best thing about their stories is that, and both of them, which is very rare in literature, that they don't take a side. Even in this story, Lihaaf, she doesn't take the side of Begum. She shows Begum as a victim in the beginning, but then slowly she becomes vampish or something like that. मतलब वो भी villain होने लग जाती है. और again last में हमको लगता है कि यार उसकी अपनी एक side है, बच्ची की अपनी एक side है. जो नवाब है उसको भी ऐसा पूरा डार्क नहीं दिखाया है, तो कैरेक्टर्स आर लाइक इन बिटवीन, देयर ग्रे. सेम इज विद मंटो. लाइक I've read his stories and worked on his stories in Mantostan. Even if he's showing his hero is a murderer, he goes and kills people and brings jewelry for his girlfriend, and and they are in love. So the characters are so dark. At the same time, you don't you know you're left with the confusion that whose side is the writer. So they don't take sides. And politically also, they never took sides. They never took side of Pakistan, India, Hindu, Muslim. So they were so bold. आज के दौर में क्या होता है, जितने भी राइटर हैं समवेयर उनका झुकाव एक तरफ हो जाता है, या वो लेफ्टिस्ट हो जाते हैं या वो राइटिस्ट हो जाते हैं. कोई राइट साइड में लिख रहा है तो राइट विंग मतलब जो थॉट्स है उनकी साइड लिखेगा, कोई एकदम अगेंस्ट लिखेगा. बट इतना इस तरह से लिखना और अपनी इतनी डार्क कहानियों के अंदर इतना सटायर के साथ, इतना हल्के फुल्के अल्फाज के साथ चीजों को, इतनी गहरी सिचुएशंस को लाना, ये मुझे नहीं लगता कि किसी के बस का है. ये तो मतलब ये अपने आप में मंटो और इस्मत चुगताई दोबारा पैदा नहीं हो सकते.
So well said. अब ये बताइए, if you could take one more story of hers, which one would you do? And what could we probably maybe hope to see next for fans of hers?
I will tell you later on. I'm still reading some of her stories.
Okay, which ones do you like then? Tell me, so that at least we know which ones we should also be reading.
See, I've read more of Manto. I'll tell you honestly. Less of Ismat. Ismat's like few of her stories I read, but only Lihaaf left a chap on my mind. I read more of Manto's stories. Many, like almost कोई कहानी छोड़ी नहीं होगी मंटो की.
तो उसकी कौन सी फेवरेट कहानी है आपकी?
Last Salute. Again, I'm working on a film with the similar name, Last Salute, but that's just a small inspiration from the Manto story, and then film is set in today's time. Last Salute was a beautiful story. Then there was another story called Assignment. ठंडा गोश्त खोल दो, मतलब वो आपको हिला देती है वो कहानी, वो जो पार्टीशन की टाइम की कहानी है. And there are like number of his stories, so many stories. Even उनकी जो एक स्याह हाशिए एक बुक है जिसमें छोटे इंसिडेंट्स टाइप ऑफ लाइक वो है, उस नंबर ऑफ इंसिडेंट्स, और हर एक पैराग्राफ आपको झंझोड़ता है.
A lot of people think Lihaaf, especially very controversial, because some academics, some readers also insist, because it shows not only, of course, the queer, the LGBTQ, the different side of sexuality, but also the theme of child molestation. Or, so people have actually critiqued it, but you showed it quite boldly in your film. So I wanted to ask you that, because that was also kind of, I didn't know how you would tread.
I'll tell you an incident जो बहुत inspiring था मेरे लिए. When we went for the censor screening of Mantostan, we had already had a deal with the Star Television. So मतलब हमको उनको rights बेचने थे. So we were looking कि क्योंकि television पे film आने के लिए you need a UA certificate, not an A certificate. So we were like कि जिस दिन मैंने सोनल से कहा, मैंने कहा यार आज सेंसर की स्क्रीनिंग है, उसने कहा ये तो पक्का बैन हो जाएगी. मैंने कहा यार अच्छा बोलो. तो कहते नहीं पक्का बैन हो जाएगी, सेंसर वाले तो किसी की सुनते नहीं है. जब हम वहां गए, स्क्रीनिंग खत्म हुई, आई वाज कॉल्ड इनसाइड, तो मैं थोड़ा कांप रहा था अंदर से. मुझे लगा कि या तो बैन करेंगे या तो पता नहीं क्या क्या बोलेंगे. जितने भी सेंसर कमेटी के मेंबर थे वो सब खड़े हो गए, एंड दे सेड हु रोट द स्क्रीनप्ले. आई सेड आई रोट इट. They started shaking hand to me, and like it became a star moment for me. And the officer of that censor board, he said, this is very, like, you have made it brilliantly, but we can only give you A certificate. I said, sir, if you will give us A certificate, we are independent filmmakers. He said, okay, then we'll give few cuts and we will. They were so generous, जो कि कभी होता नहीं है किसी के साथ. They said कि ठीक है, तो next क्या बना रहे हो? मैंने कहा लिहाफ. He said, make Lihaaf boldly. And he was a Bengali guy, I still remember. He said, आप उसमें आके मत बोलना सीन काट दो, उसको ए हो या यू हो, कुछ भी हो, बट जैसा है वैसे ही बनाना. अभी मेरा दिल बहुत कहता है मंटो की आत्मा मुझे झंझोड़ेगी जब मैं आपके 2 सीन काटूंगा इसमें से. So I never thought that it will be controversial, but yes, when we were picturizing a scene where Begum, undresses herself in front of a teenager girl, so we actually shot a scene where Begum actually undresses herself, which we showed in the festivals, not on boot, obviously, because they had to chop that into like
It's
clothing.
surprising because usually OTT platforms are very bold and
Yeah,
they've allowed us
nowadays
to explore sexuality.
but nowadays things have changed. So there's a pressure from the government side also. So they told me to remove the wide shot and use her close up while undressing. So we were careful for just for that scene. Otherwise, there's nothing. This is a film which you can watch with your family also. Biggest compliment was when Ismat Chughta's family told me, and especially Ashish, his grandson, he's himself a filmmaker. He told me that इससे ज़्यादा honest लिहाफ कोई नहीं बना सकता था. So that was the biggest achievement for us. So yeah.
No, it's true. And like I said, many of the themes actually have explored this quite deeply. Any closing thoughts that you have as we end for today? Anything you'd like to tell us?
I think I already said what I had to say. But yes, I'm thankful to you for, acknowledging Ismat's work and Lihaaf. बिकॉज लिहाफ को लेकर हम लोग काफी टाइम से काफी डरे हुए थे कि ऑडियंस को पता नहीं कितना समझ में आएगी क्योंकि काफी कॉम्प्लेक्स है. हालांकि लिहाफ को 11 इंटरनेशनल अवार्ड मिले तो बहुत सारी अलग अलग देशों में दिखाई गई है. यूरोप में हमने जर्मनी में ओपन हुई थी, फिर यूएस में 3 फेस्टिवल्स में अवार्ड मिले, मैक्सिको में एक मैक्सिकन फेस्टिवल है जो कि मतलब बिल्कुल उसका नाम भी कुछ मैक्सिकन है, आई कांट इवन प्रोनाउंस. सो वहां पर तनिष्ठा गॉट बेस्ट एक्ट्रेस अवार्ड. तो सबटाइटल्स से और विजुअल्स से लोग समझ जाते हैं कभी-कभी.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for making such a beautiful movie.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.